So during the period when I was coming up, which was the 70s, we, as in like musicians, began to get bored of kind of the rock guitar culture, and that expressed itself in different ways, one of which, me and my crew started playing jazz instead. Later, I went on to punk music, which is a more cultural expression of boredom with rock and roll. Within rock and roll itself, those who were sort of the loyalists to it, they stuck right with it. They stuck with their guitars and their like sonic world a little bit, except they started needing all these effects, right? That became the thing, kind of, and all these devices, all these processors, all these things, and to me, in a sense, to think about that, this is all in hindsight and everything, is that, to me, that says that these instruments themselves, were no longer effective, and so they needed to be affected. And I completely understand where that comes from, because I myself was bored with that and uninspired with that. But I think there's an alternative to that, which is instead of buying all this stuff, to affect it, is why not make effective instruments, that are effective? How does this make the sound that you want? Instead of what do I have to do to this to get it to do what I want it to do? And well, obviously, I think that's a process worth considering. And so for me, the effects are in the instruments, because the instruments are effective in what they do, as opposed to like taking this thing and then doing that to it. And that's a different mentality. And the mentality about that, to me, like in a way, is it sort of diminishes like what playing is about, and it diminishes what instruments are about a little bit. It kind of says, well, this is gonna make a, whatever pitch you choose, this is gonna play, an E major chord. And so, we'll take this chord and we'll do all this shit to it so it doesn't sound like that same old E major chord or whatever, It's, where the thing that, as a person playing this thing, maybe the idea should be like, how can I play this differently? How can this sound that I like, that I can't get from this instrument, like how could I get that from it? So I can just play the thing instead of sit there and fiddle with knobs, or like do all this stuff that happens to it after I've played it, and yeah, that sort of turns the whole idea of being a musician on its head a little bit, that it's like what you're playing and how you do it, like physically right there, it kind of takes that away from you a little bit. It's, I understand where it comes from completely, and I bought my share of little boxes that, did shit, and that's interesting, that's fun. I mean, I spent my time doing that, and, like things to be as distorted as possible, and like whatever, However, I think like, yeah, I think it kind of behooves us to try to get back to like our playing and our relationship to the things that we're playing, like get some more, I don't know, livingness into the sound, you know? Because to me, after a while, and of listening to that, it all started sounding like where's the real thing in this? Like, I know I'm hearing this phaser or this chorus or whatever, you know, like that's just as boring as like just hearing the plain guitar got, right? And the problem is thinking that because you have this guitar, it can do anything that you want to do. That's a really narrow idea, you know. Oh, I can like put these things on it and make this guitar sound just like a flute, or I can put this kind of fuzz on it and it'll sound like a saxophone, or I can like get this guitar to sound like this, or I can get this guitar to sound like that. And that's all cool, and that's like, you know, if you're stuck with doing that, like, yeah, do that. But maybe the flaw in this system is thinking like, I can only play this guitar that I bought, you know? And I need to buy things to dress it up, you know, to disguise it, you know, and disguise the fact that I'm still playing like, you know, the same old chords and, you know, the same old instrument as people have been doing for, you know, since the 50s or whatever. It's, you know, maybe it's instead of like keep piling shit onto that, it makes maybe more sense to just rethink it from the ground up, you know, go to thing of like, well, if I practice really a lot, I can play this and it'll sound like I'm drumming on something with sticks. Well, cool if you can do that. That's great. But why not make something you can play with sticks? Or like, I put tons of reverb on this. You know, you can make an instrument that has tons of reverb right built within it. You know, I don't ever need to use reverb with these things that I make. They're very, their whole bodies resonate, you know. So if you want that, like, go to that and start from that, you know, instead of just like dripping all this stuff on top of them, you know. And those things will respond to your immediate physical playing. Yeah, here's the thing, like if you can't get the sound that you want, get something that you can get that sound from, right? You know? It's not like, you know, you don't have to be locked into this. It's a sort of cultural idea, and this is also boringly male too, is the whole phallic guitar thing, you know? It's like, there's a whole lot of other ways to stand, and there's a whole lot of other ways to do things than that, right? It's not that they're bad, you know, but they're created to express a very, you know, old culture way of looking at things, you know, like rock and roll as a thing is a very white male expression of blackness in a way, and it has its limitations because of that, right? It's like you know, it's kind of geared towards saying these particular things, you know, and if that's really what you want to address and examine in your life, that's cool. But if you don't, why take its tools and its templates and try to twist them into, you know, something that they aren't for? It's like, you know, and misappropriation of things is just like, you know, man, I've lived in a lot of cars, you know, and cars weren't made to live in, and, you know, I probably spent half my life in the 90s living in a motor vehicle, And so nothing wrong with that. And it gives you, if that's what you wanted to do, when I was doing that, I was expressing mobility and lack of connection to the places that I was exploring. So if that's what you want to do, if you want to deconstruct, kind of this white male myth of power and stuff like that, yes, stick with the templates of rock and roll, but there is so much more to music than that. And if you want to break out of that preset a little bit, then use different things and different templates and that just makes sort of common sense. Start from somewhere else. There's no rule that you have to start from there, and wherever you start from, you can always change that. You're not stuck with this, It's, I don't know, that seems so dumb to me to stay with something that you're discontent with instead of looking where you can start from a place of contentment. So if you find yourself using effects and effects, think about, well, maybe what I'm using isn't effective to start with, and maybe I should start with something effective. I don't know. That kind of makes logical sense to me, and that it would be worth it for us to really think about what we're doing when we engage with music. What do we want from it? How do we think this is guiding us with this? And what does this set of parameters allow us to do? Same thing, you're living in a car, you get cold, you have to piss in a bottle or whatever. There's a lot of downsides to that life. Yes, you have this freedom to travel, and you're not paying any rent, and there's lots of good things about it. You get to go places and meet interesting people and experience the wonder of the road, all that kind of stuff. I enjoyed it. But there's a downside of that was that I couldn't really make things. I could write a lot. I could play the guitar and clarinets and whatever I had around with me. But eventually I domesticated, so that I could have a shop and make things because I like doing that. And so applying the same thing to music, you're sort of banging your head up against this wall of rock and roll sonority and methodology and stuff like that, and kind of twisting it around, and you need all this stuff all the time. You gotta buy this new plug-in, or now it's on so it's those. It used to be just little boxes, and that's forcing you to be a consumer because you're discontent with your actual life. And that should be questioned. Is this really what you want? Do you want to be a consumer? Is that the response is that what you want to be generating out of your discontent with your life, that you want to consume your way out of it? And I know many people do. That's the way of capital. And so if that is genuinely what you want, by all means, yes, but if it isn't, but if that isn't really what you want, then look for a way to express what you want.